Sarah's scream ripped through Michigan Avenue just as her 6-year-old daughter let go of her hand. 1 second, Lily was there, bundled in spotless white, humming softly as they pushed through the Christmas crowd. The next, she was stepping toward a man curled on the frozen sidewalk like a pile of discarded rags. Shoppers flowed around him without looking. Sarah saw the filth, the danger, the smell before she saw Lily's small arms lifting. And in that heartbeat, before she could run, before she could stop it, her daughter wrapped herself around a stranger everyone else had learned not to see. The scream that tore from Sarah's throat wasn't just fear. It was a primal, suburban recoil against the intrusion of raw, unfiltered reality into her carefully curated life. It was the sound a mother makes when she sees her pristine, white-coated 6-year-old daughter wrapping her arms around a heap of human wreckage on a freezing Chicago sidewalk. It was December 23rd. The air on Michigan Avenue was sharp enough to cut glass, filled with the frenetic energy of last-minute shoppers, the aggressive cheer of Salvation Army bells, and the biting wind whipping off the lake. Sarah was already vibrating with anxiety. Her mental checklist was a scrolling ticker tape of doom. Did she get the right artisanal olive oil for her mother-in-law? Were the matching pajamas wrapped? Had she forgotten to move the elf on the shelf again? She gripped the hand of her daughter, Lily, tightly. Lily, bundled in a puffy white snowsuit that made her look like a panicked marshmallow, was the only calm point in Sarah's universe. "Come on, sweetie, hurry up. We still need to get to Nordstrom before the rush," Sarah urged, her eyes fixed on the middle distance, navigating the sidewalk like a battlefield commander. She didn't see him at first. Most people didn't. He was a fixture of the urban landscape, easily edited out of peripheral vision. A mound of tattered blankets, cardboard, and misery, huddled against the granite facade of an upscale jewelry store. He was the ghost at the banquet, the inconvenient truth hidden behind the festive wreaths. He was filthy in a way that transcended mere dirt. It was layers of accumulated urban grime, a geological survey of hardship plastered onto skin weathered like old leather. His beard was a matted thicket obscuring most of his face, and the smell radiating from him, a toxic cocktail of stale alcohol, unwashed body, and the metallic tang of the street, created a 5-foot exclusion zone around him that shoppers gladly honored. But Lily wasn't a shopper. She was 6. Sarah felt the small hand slip from her gloved grip. It happened in the space between 2 heartbeats. One moment, Lily was there, anchors secure. The next, she was drifting toward the jewelry store window. "Lily, get back here right now!" Sarah snapped, turning her head. What she saw froze the blood in her veins. Lily hadn't stopped at the window. She had walked straight past the glittering diamonds and stopped directly in front of the man. The man didn't move. He was slumped over, eyes mostly closed, lost in a stupor brought on by cold or substances or just sheer exhaustion. He seemed entirely unaware of the small, bright presence standing before him. Then, with the agonizing slowness of a dream turning into a nightmare, Lily stepped inside the exclusion zone. The smell didn't seem to register with her. She extended her small, pink-mittened arms, and she hugged him. She wrapped her arms as far as they would go around his thick, grimy coat, pressing her pristine white cheek against the shoulder that smelled like a dumpster fire. That's when Sarah screamed, "Lily, no! Get away from him!" The shriek stopped traffic. Heads snapped. The spell broke. Sarah lunged forward, adrenaline overriding every other instinct. She grabbed the back of Lily's snowsuit and yanked her back with force that made the little girl stumble. "What is wrong with you?" Sarah hissed, shaking Lily by the shoulders, her voice trembling with a mix of terror and fury. "You never, ever touch strangers, especially—" She caught herself before saying disgusting ones, aware of the dozens of eyes now on them. Lily looked up, her large brown eyes wide and uncomprehending, brimming with instant tears. "But Mommy, He looked so cold. He looked like he needed it. We are leaving. Now. Sarah practically dragged Lily away, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She felt the judgment of the crowd, some agreeing with her protective instinct, others silently condemning her harshness. She threw one last terrified glance back at the man to ensure he wasn't following them. He hadn't moved. The hug hadn't roused him. He remained a statue of despair. But in the brief scuffle, when Lily had pulled away, the movement had dislodged the filthy, frayed woolen scarf wrapped high around his neck. It had slipped down just an inch on the right side. Sarah's feet stopped moving. The world tilted on its axis. The breath hitched in her throat, burning deeper than the Chicago chill. She stared, ignoring Lily's whimpers, ignoring the jostling crowd. There, on the side of the man's neck, just below the jawline, revealed by the slipped scarf, was a mark. It wasn't dirt. It was pigment. A birthmark. It was dark red, almost purple, a port wine stain. But it was the shape that stopped Sarah's heart. It was jagged, asymmetrical, looking incredibly like a crudely drawn, four-pointed star. No, the word echoed in the cavern of her mind. It's impossible. She knew that star. She had traced it with her own little fingers 30 years ago. "Mommy, you're hurting my hand," Lily complained. Sarah looked down, realizing her grip had become vice-like. She loosened it, her mind reeling, trying to process the visual input that defied everything she knew to be true. That star belonged to Michael. Michael, her big brother, the golden boy of their suburban Ohio town, the star quarterback with the scholarship to Notre Dame, the one who protected her from bullies and snuck her extra dessert. Michael, who had vanished off the face of the earth 15 years ago. The official story, the one their parents clung to until they died, broken-hearted, was a hiking accident out west, a fall in a remote canyon where his body was never recovered. But Sarah knew the darker truth they whispered about. The prescription pills after the knee injury in his sophomore year of college, the spiraling addiction, the theft from their parents' savings, the angry phone calls, and finally, the silence. They had searched. God, they had searched. Private detectives, Salvation Army trace requests, endless flyers. Sarah had spent her 20s looking at the faces of every homeless person in every city she visited, searching for a ghost. Eventually, she stopped looking. She buried Michael in an empty casket in her heart. She built a safe, predictable life with David, an accountant, and had Lily. She constructed a world where chaos couldn't enter, a fortress against the kind of darkness that had swallowed her brother. And now, a four-pointed star on a filthy neck on Michigan Avenue was threatening to burn that fortress to the ground. "It can't be him," her rational mind screamed. "It's a coincidence, a cruel trick of the light. Michael is dead. That thing over there it's just a junkie." But the memory of the star was absolute. It was too specific. "Sarah, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." She jumped, realizing she was blocking the sidewalk outside a Crate and Barrel. A woman she vaguely knew from the PTA was looking at her with concern. Yes, the cold," Sarah stammered. "Come on, Lily." She fled. She dragged Lily to the parking garage, buckled her in, and drove to their quiet suburban street on autopilot. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the wheel. When they got home, she dropped Lily off with David, who was blissfully unaware in the living room, watching ESPN. "Forgot something downtown," she lied, her voice brittle. "Be right back." "In this traffic? Sarah, are you nuts?" David called out. But the door was already closing. She drove back to the city like a woman possessed. The holiday lights blurred into streaks of aggressive red and green. What if he was gone? What if she had hallucinated it? She parked illegally 2 blocks away and ran. The cold burned her lungs. He was still there. The crowds had thinned slightly as evening approached. He was now just a dark shape against the illuminated window filled with platinum and sapphires. The contrast was sickening. Sarah stopped 10 feet away. The smell hit her again, waves of abject neglect. Up close, the reality of his condition was stomach-turning. His hands, exposed now, were covered in sores and grime, the fingernails thick and yellow. Her courage wavered. This wasn't her Michael. This was a monster created by the streets. But then he shivered. It was a violent, full-body spasm that rattled the cardboard beneath him. It was a deeply human movement of suffering. Lily's voice echoed in her head. He looked like he needed it. Sarah took a step forward, then another. She entered the exclusion zone. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was tiny, swallowed by the wind. He didn't react. "Sir?" She tried harder, forcing authority into her tone that she didn't feel. Slowly, painfully, the heap of blankets shifted. A head lifted. Eyes peered out from the matted hair. They were bloodshot, roomy, unfocused. They looked right through her, seeing only another potential threat or another source of disappointment. Can I help you?" she asked, the standard suburban query sounding ridiculous here. He let out a sound that was half cough, half grunt. He started to turn away, dismissing her. Sarah's heart hammered. She had to know. If she walked away now, she would be haunted forever. She knelt down on the freezing pavement. The cold seeped instantly through her jeans. She was inches from him now. The smell made her eyes water. "I need to see your neck," she whispered. He froze. The request was bizarre, threatening in its specificity. A flicker of awareness, perhaps fear, crossed his clouded eyes. Before he could recoil, Sarah reached out with a trembling, gloved hand. She moved slowly, telegraphing her lack of aggression. Her fingers brushed the coarse, filthy wool of his scarf. He flinched violently, a guttural noise escaping his throat. He swatted weakly at her hand. "Please," Sarah begged, tears stinging her eyes. "Please, just let me see. I won't hurt you." Something in her voice, the naked desperation, must have penetrated the fog. He stopped fighting. He held still, breathing heavily, like a trapped animal waiting for the blow. Sarah gently hooked a finger under the scarf and pulled it down. There it was, the jagged star. The port wine road map to her past. She gasped, a sound that was half sob, half scream. She ripped her glove off with her teeth, needing to feel the skin. She pressed her warm fingertips against the icy, grimy skin of his neck, tracing the outline of the mark. The man trembled at the touch. Human contact that wasn't violent was an alien concept. Sarah looked into his eyes, searching desperately behind the glaze of drugs and despair. "Mikey?" she whispered, using the childhood nickname hadn't spoken in 15 years. The man went rigid. His breath hitched. The eyes widened, the pupils contracting. The fog seemed to swirl, momentarily parting. He stared at her face, trying to assemble the pieces of a puzzle he had long since set on fire. He looked at her eyes. Sarah had their mother's eyes. His lips, cracked and bleeding, moved soundlessly. A croak escaped. Then a whisper that sounded like tearing sandpaper. "Sarah Bear?" The childhood nickname broke her. Sarah collapsed onto the sidewalk, wrapping her arms around the filthy, smelling wreck of a human being. She buried her face in the coat Lily had hugged an hour ago, sobbing uncontrollably, uncaring of the lice, the dirt, the stares of passers-by. "Oh my God, Michael! Oh my God, it's you! You're alive!" He didn't hug her back. He couldn't. His arms were frozen, both physically and emotionally. But he leaned into her, a great, shuddering weight collapsing against her shoulder. He began to weep, a dry, hacking sound of ancient grief dislodged from deep within his chest. They sat there on the freezing concrete under the festive lights of Michigan Avenue, for what felt like hours. A well-dressed woman watching from a distance finally approached, her face softened by the raw scene. "Honey, do you need me to call someone? The police? An ambulance?" Sarah lifted her head, her face streaked with mascara and grime transferred from Michael's coat. "Yes," Sarah choked out, holding her brother tighter as he continued to shake. "Call an ambulance. Please. This is my brother. I found my brother." The hospital waiting room was a different kind of sterile hell than the street. Sarah sat in a plastic chair, still wearing her coat, watching the double doors. David was there now, silent and stunned, holding her hand. He hadn't asked questions after her frantic phone call, he just came. The doctor finally emerged. He looked weary. "He's severely hypothermic, malnourished, dehydrated. He has advanced pneumonia and several untreated infections on his extremities. The toxicology screen was extensive. Opiates, benzodiazepines, alcohol." The doctor paused, looking sympathetically at Sarah. "He's in bad shape, Mrs. Davis. Another night or two out there in this cold, and he wouldn't have made it." Sarah nodded numbly. "But he's alive." "He is. We became him on antibiotics and fluids. He's sedated now to let his body rest. The road ahead, it's going to be very long. The physical recovery is one thing. The addiction, the mental trauma of 15 years on the street?" "I know," Sarah said, her voice steely. "We have time now." Later that night, after David had gone home to relieve the babysitter, Sarah sat by Michael's bed in the ICU. He was clean for the first time in a decade and a half. Shaved, his face looked terrifyingly gaunt, a skull beneath pale skin. But the structure was there. The nose he broke falling out of the oak tree, the strong jawline, and the star on his neck, now standing out starkly against the clean skin. Sarah gently took his hand, avoiding the IV tubes. She thought about the chain of events. If they hadn't been late shopping, if Lily hadn't slipped her hand, if Lily wasn't the kind of child who saw a person where everyone else saw a problem, if Lily hadn't hugged him. Sarah remembered her recoil, her disgust. Her shame burned hot. She had seen a monster. Her 6-year-old daughter had seen a human being shivering in the cold. Lily's innocent intuition had pierced a veil that Sarah, with all her adult cynicism and protective walls, couldn't see through. That hug, that tiny act of unsolicited grace, had been the catalyst. It was the butterfly effect that saved a life. The next morning, Christmas Eve, Sarah brought Lily to the hospital. "Is that the man from the street?" Lily asked, looking skeptically at the clean-shaven, sleeping figure in the bed. "Yes, baby, that's him." Sarah knelt down to Lily's eye level. "Lily, do you know who that is?" Lily shook her head. "That's your uncle, Michael, Mommy's brother, the one who was lost." Lily's eyes went wide. She looked from Sarah to the man in the bed. "The one in heaven?" "We thought he was," Sarah said, her voice thick. "But he wasn't. He was just very, very lost. And you found him." Lily walked over to the bed. She looked at the strange tubes and machines. Then she looked at Michael's sleeping face. "He doesn't look cold anymore," she whispered. "No," Sarah said, joining her daughter at the bedside and placing her hand over Michael's bony fingers. "He's not cold anymore." Michael stirred. His eyes fluttered open, clearer than the night before, though still heavy with sedation. He looked at Sarah, a faint recognition in his eyes. Then his gaze shifted downward to the small face peering over the bed rail. He looked at Lily, the little girl who had broken the exclusion zone. A tear leaked from the corner of Michael's eye and tracked into his ear. He didn't have the strength to speak, but he slowly, weakly, lifted his index finger and tried to move it toward Lily's hand on the mattress. Lily didn't hesitate. She took his rough, scarred finger in her small, soft hand and squeezed. "Merry Christmas, Uncle Mike," she whispered. Sarah watched them, the golden boy who fell so far, and the little girl whose heart was too big for the world she lived in. The road ahead was terrifying. There would be relapses, trauma, anger, and the agonizing work of rebuilding a shattered soul. But as she looked at the star birthmark on his neck, pulsing gently with the beat of the monitor, Sarah knew one thing for sure. The hardest part, the finding, was over. The healing could finally begin.